Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Luke Corletto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. My guest speaker for today's episode is the CEO and fly by the seat of your pants genius at Creative Genius. Lyn inspires and co-inspires with divine wisdom to elevate people from every facet of life to live more creative and meaningful lives. She works with entrepreneurs, scientists, artists, homemakers to discover, access the lost creativity and genius still dormant within. Lyn is known for captivating her audiences with her personal stories of breakthrough and what it is like to journey into the realms of creative and innovative thinking. Her rich background as a bush pilot in Alaska for 10 years, as a CFI, a certified flight instructor, and her aviation science degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks generates a library of stories that will inspire. She also draws on more than 20 years as a workshop instructor, national award-winning artist, international speaker, and genius researcher. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lyn Lasneski. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you just heard in the intro, this woman is just chock full of wisdom. And I'm grateful to have her on the show today to help all of us, especially myself, this is greedy for me, to unpack what she calls our genius, right? Lyn and I were talking prior to going live about the perceptions of us as people, right? That we have this as human beings. And I sure did until I had experiences that created a different reality, which was that's the way the world is. Meaning, as I'm looking at my eyes, that is objective reality. And anything is further from the truth of what my perception of my brain thinks. And then I think everybody else sees the same thing that I see, right? Which causes communicational errors, all kinds of wackiness, right?
I can't even explain how that works physically within your brain.
So first of all, let's start at the top of this, which is how do you define genius, right? And then let's start unpacking there for the rest of it.
That's a good one. That is a good one. I hadn't even thought of starting there because most people today, genius has changed its definition. The word genius was actually invented in 1490. But the whole concept of IQ, which is what most people compare it to, didn't exist till 1940. So there was 500 years there that the word genius existed and the concept of IQ did not. So what do you imagine it meant? Okay, I'll tell you. I'll just tell you. So genius comes from the root word genus, Genus, the Latin word, which is also the same root word for Genesis. And it actually meant for 500 years, much longer now that it's meant IQ or being exceptionally smart. It actually meant the gifting or the spirit given you at your Genesis, at your birth.
Love it.
Isn't that amazing?
Beautiful.
And that's really the original definition of genius, and that's my preferred definition.
Well, right there. Go ahead.
When we talk about that, it doesn't mean that it's just like you have a special gift, but you actually have the full capacity of genius that's given to you. And that's a belief system issue you have to jump over first.
And it's quite funny that belief system is also the same initials, right? BS, because it is usually full of feces, most of our belief systems, because it works against us, right? In the sense of lack and limitation and, not me. And I really love, one of my greatest teachers was just a master of etymology, the true root of words, right? So the spirit given to you at birth, like at Genesis.
Yeah.
So it's the latent potential, that's in all of us, right?
Yes.
So by definition, that eradicates the story of, oh, not me.
It totally eradicates
it.
you
Uh-oh,
know?
right? So the victim story
Yeah,
goes away. Like, oh, that's not me. That's only special people. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I'm not smart enough, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense, right?
right.
Um,
We've actually been degeniusized by our educational
I
systems,
love that.
you know?
Well,
Yeah,
I don't love that we have. I love the term that you use because in my vector around healing, it's the same thing. We've been programmed out that we're not capable of all healing ourselves, right, by the institutions
right.
who make
Oh,
big
right,
money, right? No, 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 no. You're not qualified to heal yourself.
right.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm a walking miracle myself in that realm, and the power of the mind to heal. I mean, that goes off of genius. Well, actually, it's part of genius because it's all here. It's all here. Yeah.
so, in that regard, like that next step, when you're working with clients as you do all around the world, how do you take them from that's not me to introduce them to the possibility that, oh, yes, it is, and then remove whatever they may go through from either the overwhelm or the fear of, oh my God, is it possible? To then
Mhm.
show them that yes, and to give them an experiential reality of like, oh my gosh, it is. How do you help people go on
Yeah.
that journey?
Wow. Well, I just got goosebumps because I'm remembering I was speaking in New Zealand to the Maori people. And I had this wonderful experience with them because, I didn't know I was going to go here, but the when the missionaries went there, they were teaching them and educating them in, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is a very linear, logical, rational way to think. And because they struggled with it, they're very creative people with a lot of dance and art and everything. And when they considered themselves slow,
Mm,
much like Einstein was considered slow. I don't know if you know that,
sure.
but he was considered slow. And even, what's the word I want to say? They didn't think he was ever going to learn to read and write. And what people don't know, now I'm going off track again here, but he was actually, when he was removed from school, what people don't know is what did happen to him. And he was actually put into a very special school called the Pestalozzi School. And the Pestalozzi School, this was a gentleman who taught through visual thinking.
Mm,
But going back to how do we then change first our belief systems? Because belief is everything. And in fact, one of the stories that I share is this is actually a NASA story. I have a couple NASA stories, but NASA, I mean, they hire all these engineers, right? And they were only, I mean, Wikipedia and NASA both believe like only 2% of the people on the planet are geniuses. So how, when we hire, can we hire the genius engineers? How can we recognize them before we hire them? So NASA actually hired these researchers, and these researchers came in and they did all the demographics of the geniuses versus the average engineer. So they studied where they went to school, what their family was like, the region. I mean, all the different demographics you would expect, education, money, all of that. And they wanted to compare and see what influence those were, right? Between their genius engineers versus average. And here's what they came up with: nothing. However, one of the researchers did notice something that was not necessarily on there. And this was the big one. He noted that all the genius engineers actually believed they were geniuses. And all the ones who did not believe they were the average engineers. And so their big criteria became, if you're hiring somebody and they believe it, it's way more likely, like 90% likely they probably are genius engineers. So belief is a huge one. And actually, my next story is kind of a result of that. the researchers who did that study for NASA, they kind of got into the whole genius thing. And what they did is they did another study, and they took 1,600 very special people, and they tested them for genius using a divergent thinking test. Do you know what divergent thinking is?
I'm aware, but please unpack it for the audience.
Okay, I'll unpack that a little bit because I think it's an important, because when I say we've been degeniusized by our educational systems, this is one of the ways we do it, because when we are put in school, we're taught to think convergently, right? Find the one right answer. And if you miss that one right answer, you're wrong or bad. And so we are afraid to think divergently, which means is to find many answers to the same question. So like one of the famous creativity tests, it's called the Torrance creativity test or something like that. And the main thing they test for is divergent thinking. Like, for instance, if I give you a brick, this is a simple one. How many ideas can you come up with using for a brick? And shockingly, it's pretty low today. We have a very low capacity for divergent people. People think pretty simply, like, well, I'll use the brick to throw at something or whatever. So 5 to 10 ideas is probably average. You're getting pretty good, if you're around 30, and if you can get up to 100 or more, now you're on genius level. Well, anyway, they took these 1,600 people, special people, and gave them this divergent thinking test, and 98% had genius level.
98%.
98%. Now, here's what made them special. You ready for this? They were 5 years old. They were so floored by this. They followed these kids for 5 more years, gave them the exact same identical test. Okay. So now they're averaging 10 years old, in there. This time only 32% hit divergent, the genius level thinking.
That quickly
they followed them for 5. Yeah. Wow. 5 more years. Now they're averaging 15. They've become very rational, linear, logical thinkers. This time it was down to 10%.
Yeah. That's scary. Yeah.
And adults, so they took, and that was 1,600 people. Then they took like 220,000 adults across the board from 25 to 80, gave them the same test, this time 2%, which is what Wikipedia says is, the average genius. So that story explains how we've degeniusized. So we've degeniusized them through a lack of divergent thinking, but also through visual thinking. Visual thinking is, that's how we learn from the minute we're born, right? We learn to walk, we learn to eat. We learn. Man, I'm just going off here. Is this good?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Visual thinking is like my big thing, right now, because visual thinking is not taught. And yet, if you study, I did study when I lived in Alaska, and I was in aviation back then. And actually, even when you learn how to fly, most people assume you need to be really smart. Actually, you don't. You need to be visually smart, because when you're physically in the airplane, you need to be able to see yourself, visually, spatially in the air and where you are in the air, in your mind, as well as physically in the airplane. So it's about knowing how to see. And then years later, I became an artist, and I have no training. All my training is in aviation. I have 0 training in art. So let me just say that. But I have won national awards. I've taught drawing and painting for decades now. And I would tell people, I can teach you how to draw in 3 days or your money back. And I can teach you to paint in 3 days, because it's not a talent. Visual thinking is more natural to us than verbal linear thinking. We actually had to go to school for, 18 years to learn this logical linear way of thinking. But visual thinking came to us naturally the minute we were born. And what happened is when we entered the school system and they made reading and writing a priority, we lost the muscle for visual thinking decreased. And so now we think art is a rare talent when really it's no more of a talent than learning to read and write. We just weren't taught it. So I tell people, if you draw like a 10-year-old, well, that's when you quit learning skills and learning how to draw. And the skills are actually exceedingly simple because it's actually just a shift. So I am going off here, but this is my passion. Can't help it. So Leonardo da Vinci was asked the secret to his genius. Actually, I should tell you the story about how this came to me. I'd been flying and teaching flying for years, and I quit to teach art for a decade. And then 2008 happened. That's when the economy went tech. And I'll never forget it. I was living in a rusty old manufactured home on a river, and I was sick and I was broke because of the economy. Nobody was coming to my art classes. I was teaching starving artists. That doesn't make a lot of money. And it was like the worst night of my life. And then a policeman drives into the driveway. And I see his lights. I'm in bed. It's like 10 p.m. at night. And I see his lights. He pulls into the bed or the driveway, and he goes to my front door and he pounds on it. And I'm too sick to get up. And I don't even care. I'm broke. I'm mad at God. I'm sick. My family was telling me to go back to painting or flying, and I didn't want to. I was just past miserable. So I didn't answer the door. I figured, well, he was yelling that the river was going to flood and we're evacuating the neighborhood. That's what he was yelling. I was like, well, just take me away. I don't care. Take me out. I was visualizing the Wizard of Oz, except instead of being in the air and the wind, I was in the river going out to the ocean. I was like, I don't care. Take me. And I remember he pulled out and it was all dark. And beside my bed was a book by Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill wrote a book called Painting as a Pastime. I don't know if you knew he was an artist. In fact, if you study most of the geniuses throughout history, they were artists, including Hitler. I mean, I like his genius, but he was a genius, But anyway, in that book, Winston Churchill said that in order to do what he did in leadership and to have the ideas he did, he said he had to do something else visually. He had to paint. That's why he painted. He said that's where his inspiration came. And there were many things he had said in that book. And I was thinking about that night. I don't know why, I was ready to go out in the ocean. And I'm looking at the book and I'm thinking about how he said, in order to do what I did as prime minister, I had to paint in that book. And I'm going, wow, that reminds me of what Da Vinci said. Because when Da Vinci was asked the secret to his genius, he said, sapere videre, which means to know how to see. And he said, in order, you have to learn how to see. And I was like, okay, Churchill was an artist, Hitler was an artist. I mean, there are so many geniuses throughout history who were artists. And I started connecting that the artists were becoming visual thinkers again. They lost the ability, well, like Einstein never did. The reason he had trouble educationally was because he was a visual thinker. He was not a verbal thinker. And visual thinking, I don't know if you realize, is super fast.
Right.
I mean,
You can process
if
bits
you,
of information. Yep.
yeah, it's super fast. So, like, the difference between looking at a map about where to go or reading a paragraph about where to go, that takes way more time and thinking than if you look at a map and you go, oh, that many turns. Okay. So it's a very holistic way of thinking.
Right.
Um, but the problem is that to know how to see part.
Mm. Right. So on that note, like when I was in third grade, they put me in a remedial reading class because they were teaching me to read one word left to right, and my brain processed too fast. It wasn't the remedial reading. It was too slow from the way that I processed. If somebody would have taught me to photo read, then I would have been in a genius class instead of a
Yeah,
remedial class, right? Because I didn't fit into their model.
exactly.
One
Oh,
word left to right, I was done. I'm like, you're boring me to death. I can't do this, right? Just like let me see the whole page, and we
yeah,
don't teach that, right? So 100% I'm with you, and that I let that get at my goat because it's not by accident that we have this dumbing down in the system to create worker bees instead of if we had a society of people that were all wide open and access their creativity, oh no,
yep,
some of the controlling influence wouldn't be there, right? um
right.
yeah, there's that, but
Exactly.
that's for a whole nother podcast. So
Right, right. No,
yeah,
that
yeah.
is a good one though.
Well,
Is
I mean, why
because
is it
I think
happening?
we need to learn how to think again. We
Right,
we let we let media and government and everybody else think for us
right. Yeah, we've
because we
turned over
don't
the
know how
ability.
to think.
Yeah, we've lost critical thinking because our
Yep,
institutions simply memorizing regurg, even at an academic level beyond what you're discussing, basic memorize and regurg, man, there is no critical thinking, right? Like
there
when
is a
original
yeah,
learning was, let's go outside and walk around and pick stuff up and see it and experience it, right? Not read about the
right.
lizard, pick the lizard up, right? um,
Yeah,
so back to the task at hand. So how do you assist people to, because that is an art form, to
it is.
see, how do I see differently?
Right. No, and that's the when I was reading that book that night by Churchill, I'm going and I'm thinking Da Vinci said it was to know how to see. And I go, well, I've been teaching that for 10 years at least. Because and I taught that also flying. It's about knowing how to see. Now, most people think, you hear like Steve Jobs said to think differently. This is like thinking differently, not like thinking differently in words about something else. It's actually a
Yeah,
completely different way of
right,
thinking.
right.
You're thinking, I mean, this is amazing, Lou. We actually think with our eyes and see with our brains.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to unpack that? I'm going to unpack that. We think with our eyes and see with our brains. So let me describe to you why when we were talking about perception and how we don't see accurately. Well, here are the reasons we don't see accurately. So our brain, if you can imagine the two hemispheres of the brain in your mind's eye right now, okay? And at the front of our brain, we have these two orbs that are called eyes. And the eyes are connected at the back of the eyes are retinal cells, like billions of retinal cells. And each of these retinal cells are actually brain cells. And these retinal cells pick up the information that comes into our eyes does not come in like a photograph. You probably know that already. But what it does is it comes into our eyes, it's flipped upside down, and these retinal cells are in charge of different specific pieces of information like color, value, light to dark, movement left to right, movement right to left, depth, closeness. I mean, all of these are teeny tiny puzzle pieces of the information entering the eyes, right? So the retinal cells all are carrying these bits of information back through the optic nerves to the visual cortex in the back of the brain. And so all these bits and pieces are all separated going back there. And then the visual cortex does something very interesting. It does not put it back together. the way you see out there. It goes through the Rolodex of your beliefs, your expectations, your past experiences, and it only allows the information that you already know to be put back together. So if you don't have a concept for something,
right.
The brain has never had that concept before. It does not put that information in there. And so you only always see what you already know or who you already are based on your beliefs, expectations, past experience, everything that you've learned. So the example I like to give is a true story out of Lewis and Clark journal. They were Lewis and Clark went to the Astoria, Oregon coast. They're rain. They're all on the beach, and the Lewis and Clark see these huge ships way out at sea, way out on horizon, right? And of course, huge ships way on the horizon are going to be tiny when you're on the beach because they're way out there. Well, the native Americans at that time, what they knew is
Clouds.
Canoes. And so they took these canoes, and a canoe will disappear after a while. And so for there to be a huge ship on the horizon way out there, that would mean, if their brains could have that concept, that the ship would have to be gigantic, more than they could have. Well, they had no paradigm for that. They had no paradigm. So therefore, what did their brains do?
Erase
They
it.
couldn't see it.
Yeah.
It erased it. And so what I tell people, the value in learning how to see is, if I'd been there and I'd been, their art instructor, I sat them down with paper and pen. I mean, this is kind of silly, but this is what I do in real life, is I would teach them pure contour drawing. And what pure contour, this teaches you how to see accurately, because what you do is you're following a contour edge. So if you imagine a horizon, you're following a contour edge, and then you'd have to follow the contour of the ship or the next ship. And it would force them to see what their eyes didn't naturally see. And so drawing and learning how to draw actually forces you to see what your subconscious will erase. And this is why Da Vinci's journals were not verbal journals. And he said to know how to see. He's got, I don't even remember, I think it's like 1,700 journals they found. And they are like 85% visual. The rest is like notes and grocery lists and stuff like that. But it was because he realized that by drawing it, he was able to see what he could not see based on what he knew.
Which comes back to that place that most people do and don't pay attention to it, is they still doodle, right? They're on the phone and they're just scribbling on a notepad unconsciously. They're still processing something out, but it looks like doodle. So we write it off. It looks
like doodle.
Nonsensical. It's nonsensical. Yeah.
It's bringing their visual brain involved. And even if they're not drawing anything artsy or beautiful, what they are doing is it's doing visual work in the brain, which is actually more natural. And here's the problem that I have is I'm teaching people this, and visual thinking is so natural to us that we don't even know we're doing it. It's like fish in water who doesn't know it's in water. We're visual, so I said to you, the eyes think. So I just showed you how the eyes think, because the back of the eyeballs are actually brain cells. Take it back here, they tell you what to think. So the eyes are thinking. The brain is seeing. That's what I should have said. The brain is seeing, not your eyes. The brain is seeing. Now the eyes thinking, that's what happens like when you're driving down the road, and you're going from here to work. And let's say I have my sister in the car and we're having this intense emotional conversation, and we're driving down, and I go through 4 or 5 car light, traffic lights and stuff like that. We're just having this conversation. And all of a sudden, this car swerves in from the other side, and I move, and it misses me. Now, I did not have time to think. I didn't have time to think. So how did I know to move? And that's because the eyes do think. So the brain sees and the eyes think. And so there's this whole thing about, and that's also why so many people get ideas when they're driving, because they've shifted into visual thinking. And so people are like, well, I'm just more relaxed. Well, it is more relaxed, but you're also, because you're driving, you are in a deep, stronger visual thinking mode. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm putting myself in the this is beautiful. I love this because I play in this field, and the I'm putting myself in the audience shoes going, wow, this is all interesting. Now, how can I make this into my practical life? Like, this is cool. Could be mind candy, right? Or some philosophical discussions or past that. But how can I use this in my life, right? And so like when I work with my students and clients is how do we get them to see different levels of reality, right? How do we get to see things that we don't have access to, but it's there? Meaning I have no previous experience, like the beautiful story, right? Like the indigenous people have never seen that, therefore they can't process it until one of them finally does. And once they get it, then they can describe it to others in their field.
Exactly.
And now it goes through the field, right? Now it's in the field and more people can see it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so like in the business world, right? Or in relationship like this, because this plays out in every part of our life, is how can I now, this whole seeing differently, how can I see differently, like myself, to rewrite stories about my capacity or what's possible in my relationship, what's possible in my health, right? What's possible for the world, right? And to then see differently, and then to keep seeing until that starts to manifest. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it totally makes sense because one of my courses, so of course I have art courses because it teaches you how to draw and how to see. So that's one of the very practical things you can do. In fact, I tell my people, get that old drawing on the right side of the brain book and just work your way through it, because you will be shocked, because everybody is an amazing artist. And we don't know. We think it's a rare talent until we try, and then when we trying is a big one. I lost my train of thought. Oh, the belief thing. So I also have a course that I call the belief books, because if you don't have a concept for it, you won't see it. So we actually have to force a belief we don't believe, So there's different ways of doing this. We create visual journals because the reason you want to make a visual. So Lou, imagine an iceberg. Okay, you've probably heard that 10% of our brain, is above water, and the 90%, this is the subconscious. And it's actually our subconscious that actually regulates our life, not our conscious mind. We think we're making all our choices, but it's actually our subconscious. Well, here's the interesting thing that most people don't think about is that the conscious mind is primarily a verbal thinking mind. It's like the verbal country. When you drop down into the subconscious under the waterline, submerged, you're now in the visual thinking country. So the strongest way, like a lot of people do declarations to try to change their beliefs, and they can do that all day long. But here's the problem is your conscious mind, let's say, is here, and your subconscious is going, like, let's say your goal is lose 30 pounds, So here I am with my conscious mind making declarations, using willpower and doing all this stuff to try to go over here. But your subconscious mind is going, what the heck? You've never lost weight before. You've tried this before. It's never going to happen. So that's where you have to go change the beliefs. It's not in your conscious, but your subconscious. So in that case, you want to create visuals. So that's why vision boards
Nice.
have been powerful.
Right.
They really do have power because they're speaking to that subconscious mind, which is where your beliefs are. We think our beliefs is what we say we believe, but our real beliefs are hidden down there, and they are primarily visual. So let's say you want to be a more successful entrepreneur, and you've been trying for 25 years and you're just not breaking through, and you've taken hundreds of classes and spent billions of dollars. I'm probably exaggerating, but this happens because your belief has not been shifted. So if you can actually now create something, your mind can't see you as being a successful entrepreneur, but if you can create some visuals for that, that has way more power than the verbal, but you've got to see them. Brilliant. Because it's got to enter your brain. Like, you can't create a visual and then call it done. I tell them, do like the kids do and put it up on the walls.
100%.
You hear stories.
And see it on a regular basis to reaffirm it and lock it in as a pattern. You're right. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen,
here's my pattern.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this is, what you're really hearing. Lyn is sharing gold at this point, in the sense everything's gold that she shared, but for the take practical use and put it into play right now. And that is that aspect that, our delusion is that we're running our life through our thinking mind, the conscious mind, which is a small percentage, versus, right, just like when you're looking at your computer, you're looking at a Word document, right? That's the conscious mind. All the other programs that run the computer is the subconscious mind. And that's what runs the computer. Good. So you think that the Word document is like the gem, but there's so many programs underneath running, and you're not even aware they're running. And that's what's happening in the subconscious, what keeps us running. And why is this happening to me again experience? So what Lyn is saying, which is the ultimate truth, until we go down and clean up those programs and rewrite them for your next level expression, nothing's going to change. It's all going to be temporary. Right. And so the practical way to get there, one of the fastest ways to get there is, as Lyn's been saying, is right through the visual medium, in order to experientially know, oh, that's real. Because I can, right? If I see it, I can believe it, right? Well, the truth is, once you believe it, you'll see it, because we're all doing that. And so to a vision board, or like in sports where they've taken like professional athletes and put them through imagery, and they actually perform better than the other athletes who are working their butt off on the court when they're just laying on the floor. Like, how is that possible? Because it's rewriting what's possible.
It is.
Yeah.
In my belief book journey, which is a course, I even use some of my aviation training in there, because in flying, when you're teaching somebody how to fly, you take them through what they call scenario-based training, SBT. So when you do scenario-based training, and the reason for doing that is they found if they just taught, flight students, like, okay, you lose power, what are you going to do? And you teach them that, they will do what they see more than what they learn to do. So an example would be like, I used to live in Alaska, and the military air base was really close there to where I used to teach out of Fairbanks. And fortunately wasn't one of my students, but we had a student who was flying, and civilians can't land on that airport, right? An airbase. So when a instructor would teach him, okay, what are you going to do? You just lost power. The student would go, okay, you want to always land. You're taught land at the closest airport. But he didn't land there because he knew that was bad. And he actually crashed in a real scenario. And so from experiences like that, they discovered, we got to make the scenario real. So part of the belief book training is not just the visual work, but it's what I call scenario-based training, where you actually practice the thing that you're believing for, as if you already own it. In fact, there's a
Nice.
wonderful book, Alter Ego. Is it Alter Ego?
That's been out for a while. That's
Yeah, it's been
I'm
out.
with you. I don't have the exact title, but I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, and he talks in there about how he's helped tons of athletes and high achievers get where they are by acting as if.
Right.
That whole scenario based training. So when you're acting as if, it's now not just visual, but it's in your body, it's in your emotions,
All the senses. Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. There's so much
Covered
here.
a lot of ground.
Yeah, well, we did, and there's still, like, for me, I'm like, oh, we can unpack that. We can unpack that. We can unpack that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a few things. One, the Einstein quote that you have on your site is beautiful, and it reminded me of another one of his, which is, we can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that existed when the problem was created. And I like that from the place of this conversation is, but most of us keep trying to do that, right? We're stuck inside the same context of which I created this. I brought this thing to my life now, and I'm trying to get out of it from that same level of thinking, and we can't. And so that beautiful reminder of how to see differently, right? How to get out, the old term, like, how do I get outside the box, right? How do I see differently? Yeah.
How do we imagine? Imagination is huge. Imagination is huge. And in fact, I think that's Einstein has so many quotes that that imagination is more
powerful
than knowledge.
Right.
And then, of course, the quote you're referring to, it's one of my favorites because it refers back to me to what genius actually means, which is gifting or spirit. Because he says in there, let me see if I remember it, the rational mind is a faithful, no, the rational mind is a servant, and the intuitive mind is a sacred gift. And we've created a society that honors the servant and forgotten the gift.
Yeah.
So my whole goal is to give people that gift back.
Right. And thank you for doing that, because what a shame we have put the emphasis on the limiting experience versus the unlimited experience, right?
Yeah.
The genius gift, that's our capacity. And we've stuffed it in a box and put it in a closet and then locked it. And then to the point now that as time keeps going by, more and more people won't even recognize it's there. It's not even an option, right? Because apathy begets apathy. And now it withers to the point of atrophy, right? Versus right, like, knock, knock, knock. No, you're still in there. We're gonna have to get some shovels to dig it out, but it is still there, right? Let's bring it back out to play for sure. So ladies and gentlemen, please remember, right? Listen to what's being said here is back to the very top of the hour, the definition that it's not for specific few people. It was allocated to only the mental body for IQ, right? That's a small aspect of what genius is.
Right. Tiny.
Tiny. And yet the world has been, that's it. So unless you have this cerebral identity of this, ability to process only in the mental body, then you don't belong in that category, and it's nonsense.
Right.
And this is Lyn's body of work, is to help us reconnect to that creative genius that's in all of us. And we support you wholeheartedly to do that. So please go.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say our world is lamentably short on genius right now. That's all.
Yeah, no, 100% is like, the old, it's too cliche, but it's needed now more than ever for each person, right? To reconnect and remember. And that's the beauty. It's not something that you have to do. It's something you allow to come back out and play.
Yes,
and nurture
exactly.
It, right?
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing then, back right there. It is.
Yeah. So in closing, what would you like to leave with the listening audience in the sense of either a final thought or definitely ways to access? We'll have links to your site hyperlinked under the show notes. But if you have any other ideas or skill sets or tools you want to
Yeah.
share
Oh
with, please
man.
do.
I'm full of tools, of course, because if you don't make it practical, just get a visual journal,
Mm,
get a journal and start. It's not about what you write. It's really about what you create in there visually. And if you feel like you have no art skills, well, you can do collage. But I highly recommend uh, I call it pure contour drawing or blind contour drawing, where you just draw something in front of you every day. And the problem that a lot of people have is they feel like I'm not learning anything. So blind contour drawing means you never look at your paper.
mm.
You only look at the thing. So if I'm looking at you, Lou, right now, and I was drawing you, I would look right here and I'd be drawing away down here. I wouldn't care. I don't care what it looks down here because what I'm learning to do is how to see you.
Beautiful.
If I look down here, I'm going
Right.
to make it about trying to make it look like you by what I know, eyes, nose, mouth. But that's how it works is when I'm looking at you, I never look at my paper and I don't care what shows up on my paper. I'm really learning about you. So, or seeing you. I'm learning how to see you.
Mm.
So, ways to get a hold of me. I was talking to my assistant. So, I think what we're going to do is right now we have a bunch of really cool sales going on because it's the holidays. So we have I have a membership called the Creative Genius League where we're all learning everything. Everything's in the league. We learn how to draw, we do belief books. I mean, we cover everything. So if you're part of that membership, so that's around 40% off right now. My art, which is also on my website, is 25% off. And I have a webinar that's an hour long that I'm releasing for $7. And I don't have a link for that, but I'll tell you guys what. If you go to my website, yourcreativegenius.org, there's a little pop-up that says you can get a free print if you put in your email. If you put in your email for that free print, we will drop you an email that will give you all three offers, which we will keep good till for like a couple weeks after you release this, Lou. How does that sound?
That's very nice. Thank you so much for that generous offer, Lynn. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, again, as I, at the very top of the hour when I shared Lynn's bio, her depth and breadth. So we first, and I should have shared this at the top, we first met when we were training with Les Brown. And
Yeah.
like Lynn shared these stories of aviation, and everybody that listens on the podcast knows that, I'm a skydive instructor, so I love being in the air. And right, so this resonation, so being, a bush pilot in Alaska and being a CFI right? So that means she's a certified flight instructor, but she also is a certified flight instructor for instrumentation, which is a whole nother dimension. And then a multi-engine instructor. So that means, flying different size planes. And so, and then to leave that world and slide into by trusting this process, because she's different, going, there's a calling here. And to, again, without training, but trusting the genius, she's created a different life path, right? So she's a student of her own work. And I love that.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, right. And as I am, right? So like I'm a poster boy for what's possible in my world as you are for yours, right? So please reach out to Lynn. We will have her links in the show notes and definitely take her up on that opportunity. Putting in your email, you'll get a free print, which is absolutely delicious. I love that. And then they will tag they will link up and send you the offers she just talked about, and she'll keep those valid for the few weeks after this is put out. But then after that, they're gone. So take action. Cool.
Right.
So Lynn, thank you for your time. Thank you for your genius.
Thank you.
And thank you for keep waking up the genius in others. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor. It's my passion, my honor. I can't help it. That probably showed up.
So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, abundant blessings. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living Podcast, The Art of Living. Now go to loucorletto.com, LOUCORLETO.com to receive your free training, the operator's manual for your vehicle. See, when you buy a phone, you get a manual. When you buy a car, you get a manual. When you entered your body, no manual. Let me teach you how it's really designed to work. Also, help me help others and share this podcast far and wide. And subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, abundant blessings.